Hey guys, how's it going? Today's video is going to be my best and worst books of 2020. I'm going to be picking out my 5 favorite and 5 least favorite books that I read this year. I'm going to alternate, so I'll do like my 5th least favorite, 5th favorite, 4th least favorite, 4th favorite, etc. And that way I can end with my favorite book, and that will just be great. I'm also going to be mentioning which month I read these books in, so if you wanted to watch the wrap-up with that book in it to kind of see my, at the time thoughts, then I'll have those linked down below as well. But in the meantime, let's just get right into it. My 5th least favorite book that I read this year is What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. This is why I call it my most favorite and least favorite, usually, because objectively, I'm sure this isn't a bad book, but it's one of my least favorite books. I read this back in March and I gave it a 4 out of 10 at the time. If I was rating my enjoyment of it though, it would probably be maybe a 2.5 out of 10. This is the story of these two guys that meet and things just keep coming up so they don't end up getting together. It was not for me. Most of these books, actually my least favorite list, I got really lucky. They're almost all from my library because any book that I wasn't sure if I was going to like, I borrowed it from the library first, and then if I loved it, I would buy it afterwards. The reason why I didn't like this book at all is because I'm not a romance person and I couldn't care about the characters and whether or not they got together. For me, if two characters meet and it's super cute, but then they don't end up getting together, okay, move on with your life. And I know that's just because I'm not a very romance-focused person, so that's just how I cope with things. But because of that, the plot was pretty much nothing for me. I didn't care about the characters, I didn't care about the stakes because to me there were no stakes. I know that some people might be thinking, well, if you don't like romance, why would you read a romance book? And that's because I read They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera last year, and it was one of my favorite books of the year. I absolutely loved it. So I decided to try another romance book that was written, at least in part, by Adam Silvera, and I realized that it wasn't the romance I loved, it was the stakes of they're both gonna die that I loved. So you live and you learn, and unfortunately I learned that I don't like this book. My 5th favorite book that I read this year is Why Death Shall Never Settle Upon This Soul by Rika Aoki. This is a poetry collection. I read this book in July. I mentioned it in my JK Readathon wrap-up. If you don't know, J.K. Rowling is a terrible TERF, so to celebrate her birthday and Harry Potter's birthday on the 31st, I decided to do a 24-hour readathon dedicated to trans authors. If you don't know, Rika Aoki is a trans woman. I loved this book. You can kind of see that I started tabbing some things, and then I realized I was going to tab up this whole book. So I definitely think that I'm going to be rereading this book. It's super short, like I said, it's just a poetry collection that isn't very long, but so much of this was just so powerful and impactful, and I read poetry to hurt. I really like really impactful poetry that just really makes you think and feel and think about how you're feeling, and this definitely was so perfect for me, so up my alley, and I'm already excited to reread this book. My 4th least favorite book was Children of Virtue and Vegens by Adeyemi. This is the sequel to Children of Blood and Bone. I didn't like Children of Blood and Bone, but it was okay. But Children of Virtue and Vengeance was so disappointing for me. I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 10, and honestly, I think that's kind of generous for me. I'm not going to go into the synopsis itself because this is the sequel, but this story takes place in a world where there was these people that had magic, and then their magic was taken, it was lost, and now they are treated as, lesser than citizens, and the rich are always against them and upping their taxes, and just life is hell, and now the main character is trying to bring the magic back. It was such a great concept, and I liked the world building that we did get. Just the vibe of it was just so rich, but the story itself really fell flat. I couldn't get behind any of the characters' motivations. A lot of them were either really weak and flimsy excuses for things, or their actions just didn't line up with that. The romance insta-love is one of the worst that I've ever read. It doesn't make any sense. There is no chemistry there. There's so many reasons for them not to get together, and it feels like one of those books that they just added in the romance just for the hell of it so that they could have some sort of stakes, but the stakes should have been the world. Like, the magic is missing, that's big stakes. You don't need, oh, but she thinks he's hot kind of thing, So this book just really fell super flat for me, and the sequel was everything I hated about the first book but more of it. And I just felt like we were spinning in circles and not getting anywhere and just wasting my time. So yeah, I'm glad that I didn't buy this book. I'm still interested in trying other books by this author because I did like the writing style, and I believe that this series is a debut. I'm not sure how many books they've written beforehand, but I know this is a debut series. So, you know, probably if she writes other books, she can only get better, and maybe those ones would be more up my alley. So nothing against the author herself, but this story was not great. My fourth favorite book that I read this year is the Poppy War Trilogy by R.F. Quaing. I'm putting all 3 books on the list, but they're heavy, so I'm just going to hold up the first one. I read the first one, The Poppy War, in April and gave it a 9 out of 10. I read the sequel in August and gave it a 9.5 out of 10. And I read the third book in December and gave it another 9.5 out of 10. This is the story of a girl who is a war orphan and lives in a really poor community, and her foster parents basically just use her for work, and her life really just absolutely sucks. So she ends up working her ass off to get into this really elite military academy. And in the first book, about half of the book is taking place in this military training academy and how nobody respects her there, nobody thinks she belongs there because she's different, she's poor, etc. And then war breaks out, and then the rest of the series is within that war and all of the turmoil from that. If you've heard anything about this book, you will probably know that there are about a bazillion trigger warnings. Trigger warnings include graphic violence, including against children, gore, animal abuse, drug use and addiction, torture, mutilation, rape, and other sexual assault, including against minors, self-harm, and human experimentation. This book is really heavy. All of those things are prevalent themes. You know, it's not just a passing mention of someone dying. No, you watch them get brutally murdered and every detail is described. I absolutely loved this series. I loved the magic system with the gods and just the mythology behind it. I loved how atmospheric it was. I really loved how the author balanced not sensationalizing war or glorifying it, but presenting the horrors of war. I also loved that in the beginning you kind of feel like there's going to be a good side and a bad side, because obviously your main character has to be the good guy and everyone else is the bad guy. But this book really explores that war, maybe it started by someone who you think is right and someone you think is wrong, but so many people get wrapped up in it, and so many innocent lives, and people that think that they're fighting for the right thing, and people that just don't know what to do, and people that are just following orders, and people that don't have a choice. I love that there isn't a good side and a bad side. It's a bunch of people trying to do what they think is best. I love that our main character fucked up so many times. I love that she was clueless and angry and trying to survive, and she did some fucked up things to do that and just had to accept that. I love that you saw the toll that everything took on her, both physically and mentally, and just so many things about this book were so well crafted, so rich, amazing world building. Like I said, there are a ton of triggers, and this is a very dark and heavy book, but if you think that you can handle that kind of thing, I highly recommend this series. It was so good. My third least favorite book that I read this year was The Soul Stealers by Jacqueline Rohrbach. I read this in January, and honestly I forgot so much about it that I had to double check my review to kind of refresh my mind on some of these things. I gave it a 3.5 out of 10, and I felt a little disappointed because I got this as an arc from NetGalley. The premise of the story was really interesting to me. Our main character is basically the heir to rule, and she has a special type of magic, and she's going to inherit it, and then she kind of sees where the magic comes from and realizes that the world is corrupt and that she doesn't want to go along with it anymore. So she runs away with her friend, and they're trying to get good magic, and I'm explaining it really badly because the plot was not well executed at all. The first chapter was so good. I was hooked in right away, and after the first chapter, it never got good again. My main complaints were that the world building was super weak. I couldn't understand the magic system. I couldn't figure it out, but so much of the book kind of depended on this magic versus this magic, but I didn't understand either of them or what they could do or where they came from or anything. Overall, just the world and the magic just really wasn't developed enough. The other thing that I really didn't like about this were the characters. They were all so flat, and I really felt like every interaction between the characters felt forced and unnatural and purely for the sake of advancing the plot or whatever plot we did have. At the time it was 4 out of 10, but honestly I think that I was just feeling polite and maybe closer to a 2.5, 3 out of 10. The third favorite book that I read this year is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I was really surprised to have this book on my list, not because I didn't think that I loved it, but because I forgot that I read it this year. Like, how did I read this year? To be fair, I read it in January, and I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. If you don't know, this is the story of Evelyn Hugo, who is a Hollywood actress who was fairly reclusive, and she was most well known for being married to 7 different men, and now, in her older age, she is doing one last interview and giving her tell-all story to this reporter. And it is such a great story. I love how real and vivid Evelyn Hugo was. I mentioned this before, but at one point she's trying to get a role in a new Little Women movie, and then maybe a month or two after I finished reading this book, I wanted to watch a Little Women adaptation because there were just a lot of people talking about it, and I'd never seen any of them, so I was going to pick one to watch, and there's been a couple. And I was like, oh, well, I should pick the one that has Evelyn Hugo in it. That one doesn't exist. Oh, Evelyn Hugo's not real. But she's just so real seeming that it was so good. Evelyn Hugo is also just such a badass and so strong, and she does a lot of things that I don't necessarily agree with. Like, she is not a great person, but I love her and I respect her, and even though I personally may disagree with some of her choices, I would never say that to her face. Also, this book broke my heart. I ended up reading it on audiobook first. There's some parts that I was crying so hard that I couldn't even see, so audiobook was great for that. This was definitely one of my favorite books. I can't believe it's only been like a year since I read this book because it just feels like Evelyn Hugo has always been a part of me. My second least favorite book that I read this year was Eyes of Horus by Joan Grant. I read this in October and I gave it 3 out of 10. This book was so boring. It's set in ancient Egypt and it's about a young boy who he's some sort of nobility and he's trying to change the world for the better and root out the corruption of Egypt, but except not. Like, nothing ever happens. He doesn't actually really do that, barely. He just talks to a couple people, really. It's just such a boring book. I think that half the reason why I rated it so low is because of how disappointed I was, because I have owned this book for about 10 million years. Like, I got it when I was a kid, and I just never read it. And for the past 2 years, this book has been on my books I need to read list. Like, it's been on different TBRs. It's been on my yearly TBR. It was one of my 2019 goals. And I just didn't get to it. So I finally read it. And after all of that wait, I didn't like it. I really don't even have that much to say about this book. Like, I really have no idea how the book was as long as it was because I don't even know what happened. Like, nothing happened. He just walked from place to place and talked to people, and he was looking at this girl that he liked, and yeah, I am glad that I read it. I'm very glad that I finally got it off my list, but it wasn't worth it. My second favorite book this year is one that I was positive was going to be my favorite book of the year, but it turns out it's not. Still Alice by Lisa Genova. I gave this a 10 out of 10, and when I read this back in March, I couldn't imagine another book being better than this. This book was amazing. This is the story of a woman who is a Harvard professor, and basically her entire life revolves around her intelligence. You know, she is a professor. All of her friends are professors, scientists. Her husband is a high-up scientist. And then she gets early onset Alzheimer's, and she is losing her memory, she's losing her mental capacities, and it's so scary to watch. I love that we not only got to see her Alzheimer's, you know, take everything that she loved from her, you also got to see how she dealt with it when she had her moments of lucidity and realized how much she was forgetting and just how hard she struggled against that. And you also saw so much of her family trying to come to grips with it. Like, her husband doesn't know what to do because he can't stop this, and he's a scientist and he's trying to do anything he can, but this isn't something he can fix. There isn't a cure for Alzheimer's. And watching him struggle to accept it and struggle to lose his wife even as she's sitting right in front of him, and also struggling to try to be strong and be reassuring for her while he's also suffering. He's losing his wife right in front of his eyes, and this book was just so emotional. I bawled like a baby. I have a reading vlog that I just sob uncontrollably. Like, this book just hit me so hard. I didn't think a book could make me cry this much. So if you like crying, please read this book. It was amazing. And now my least favorite book of 2020, The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I know a lot of people love this series. and I don't know why. I read this back in May and I gave it a 2 out of 10, and the 2 is really just because I liked the world building. It's essentially about a girl that her and her sisters are taken to the fairy world and raised there, and things are bad and magic and fairies. I liked the world building, I really liked the magic. I didn't like the main character, and I hated the romance so much. And the romance was so like prevalent and important, but it's called The Cruel Prince, and it's not like, oh man, he's a prince, he's mean sometimes, but we still love him. No, he's at a party and somebody is either like in his way or does something, like a mild inconvenience, and he rips his wings off. He harms people, he tries to kill people, he tries to kill the main character, he drugs her. Like, that's not romantic. I don't understand why people think that it is. I know that it's possible to like something while still acknowledging that it's problematic, but this is so problematic, and the things that are problematic seem to be things that people like the romance itself is not okay. He is not a good person, and I don't care what excuse you come up with for him. His actions are not okay. He shouldn't be glorified. He shouldn't be lusted after. And our main character, like, she's supposedly intelligent. It's not that she doesn't know that he's cool, realize what's going on, to see what's happening, to see how terrible he is. But she still, I don't know, is horny for him. Like, aside from that, the plot just really wasn't anything special to me. Honestly, the only thing I liked was the world building. That was it. I hated everything else. I hated the main character. I hated the romance, obviously. I didn't care about the plot. I didn't care about the stakes. I have no interest in continuing the series. And no offense to people that loved this book, but this was by far the worst book that I read in 2020. But now, pivoting back into positivity, I'm sure a lot of people were able to guess this, but my favorite book of 2020 was Dreadnought and Sovereign, the 2 books in the Nemesis duology by April Daniels. I read Dreadnought in July and gave it a 9.5 out of 10, and I read Sovereign in November and gave it a 10 out of 10. These books I also picked up as part of my JKR readathon. Is it kind of ironic that J.K. Rowling being a TERF is how I discovered my all-time favorite story and my all-time favorite trans story, trans author, etc.? This is the story of Dani, who is a closeted trans girl. One day, the most powerful superhero in the world dies in front of her, and when he does that, he passes along his magic to her. So now, not only does she have super strength, super speed, flight, she also transitioned, because part of the superhero's abilities is that it transforms you physically into your ideal self. So she has instant transition, and at first she thinks that obviously this is the best day of her life, and now she doesn't have to go through the trouble of coming out and of transitioning, like it's just done. And now she's realizing that she didn't, bypass the hard stuff. If anything, she made it worse because she didn't have the time to adjust. Her friend doesn't believe her, other people don't respect her the same way. Like, her parents are super against it. Trigger warnings for this one include abusive family, specifically verbal abuse, transphobia and homophobia, including slurs, intentional dead naming and misgendering, being outed without consent, specifically to parents, and specifically in the first one, talks of weight and controlled eating. Also specifically in the sequel, trigger warnings for human experimentation and implied forced detransitioning. It sounds like a lot of trigger warnings, but it's just because it covers such a wide variety of topics. If any of these trigger warnings are concerning to you, or if you need more information, same with any trigger warnings for any book, you can always reach out to me and ask me for any details you want. Like, I have no problem going through my shelf and double checking, exact specifics of trigger warnings. And if you want, spoilery details even, if you need a spoiler to get more information on whether or not this book is going to be okay or safe for you, reach out to me. My Twitter's always linked down below, or I have my email address down there as well. Comment if you want, and I'll reach out to you. Like, I don't want the trigger warnings to scare someone away from these books, because these books are amazing. I do also want to talk in the rep in this, because the rep is also amazing. Like I mentioned, Dani is trans. This is an own voices story because the author is trans, but I'm pretty sure it's actually own voices because the author is a superhero, because mortals could not write this book. So we have a trans main character, other characters under the trans umbrella, including in the second one, a non-binary character who uses they, them pronouns. Our secondary main character is Latina, and we also have a lot of side characters that are also people of color and under the LGBT umbrella. I decided that I'm actually going to do a reread of these, hopefully sometime next year. I don't know when and what my reading plans are going to be, but I loved these so much and I really want to reread them and tab them up. So I think we're going to do a reading vlog, because I just need to talk about these books for like 5 hours straight. Like, I just absolutely loved everything about this book. I love Dani. I love how authentic she is. Also the voice, like there's a lot of heavy topics in this, obviously, because she's dealing with transition, and also on top of everything, like she just transitioned, her family's kicking her out, like everybody's horrible to her, and also someone's trying to take over the world, and now she has superpowers, so she has to deal with that, you know? I really love that even though there was a lot of heavy things in this, the tone is overall pretty light. Like Dani has a great sense of humor, and I really love her as a narrator. I also love that it felt so authentic because you really saw her struggle, and I really respect that after everything that happens, you see the aftermath and the toll it takes on her and her PTSD type symptoms, because it's too much, you know, it's too much for one person, and she doesn't just shrug it off, but she's strong. But even strong people have to have mental breakdowns sometimes. These books also just hit me so hard in all of my emotions. Like, I was so happy anytime anything good happened to Dani. I was so excited and invested. Like, the action scenes in this are really good. But I was also so heartbroken when the people that she thought she could rely on didn't accept her, and when she got hurt physically or mentally. I just love these books so friggin' much. And I'm gonna read anything and everything else by April Daniels because holy shit. This is why I need to dedicate an entire video to these books, because I can easily rant for hours about it. I'm gonna make a full-length movie, just talk about how much I love these books, okay? But now to summarize, these might be the best books I've ever read in my life, and obviously they're the best books I read in 2020. And there you have it. Those are my 5 best and 5 worst books that I read in 2020. Also, in the next week or so, I'm going to be going through my 2020 stats, and I'm going to show you how many books I had at each rating. So if you're curious, stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please click the like button to let me know, and subscribe to stay up to date with the rest of my videos and see my stats and see if I ever read a book that tops Sovereign and Dreadnought, and to see a full-length movie on how much I love these books. So I hope to see you guys next time, and until then, have a great day. Bye.